Broad 4% is 3 times that of most of our major competitors, and unemployment, as we've heard today, is now rising, not falling.
Well, I'd like to ask... I'd like to ask our questioner, Joseph Haveley, what he thinks.
Well, I believe that every party should take notice to some extent of the feelings of the electorate. The Conservative Party has done its level best to ignore it. Mrs Thatcher continues in power. She is undoubtedly the most unpopular leader in recent times this country has had. I think she should take note of this.
Let me hear some more views on Labour's, what Labour's putting on offer. Lady up there in the glasses.
I think there's been a huge amount of rhetoric to whitewash and cover up the extremism that's actually going on in the Labour Party. People have very short memories of what was happening over 10 years ago. Mr Kinnock, in fact, 2 years ago, promised to wipe out Militant. In fact, Militant claims 10,000 supporters still, yet less than 100 have been expelled from the Labour Party since 1983. I would just question the Labour Party stance currently, and I would urge people not to be misled.
Thank you very much. The gentleman there in the front.
Jack Straw claimed to be a realist and then listed a long list of ideals that he'd like to pursue in government. Isn't the point that it's very easy to maintain party discipline and a firm front when you're in opposition, but when Labour comes to power, the consensus will break down and what we'll get is a mess?
Right, let's hear another view. Gentleman on the front row at the corner.
That socialists always say that it's never been tried properly anywhere else, and why is it Jack Straw could possibly make the statements he made when the Hungarians are rushing to set up a stock market and the ideas that he expounded are being rejected throughout Eastern Europe?
And the gentleman there with his hand up.
I think it is clear that Labour are abandoning some of the principles which have been traditionally associated with that party. I think the reason they are doing so is because they recognise that we have a system which ensures that only 2 parties have a turn at taking power. They therefore have to ensure at the present moment that they are inoffensive enough to receive the disillusioned Tory votes. Until we have a system which allows representation of all the views that form part of this society, we will not get politics based on principle. We need electoral reform.
Thank you. Jack Straw, does the support for that point of view surprise you?
What, for the point of view about proportional representation?
Yes. Enormous round of applause.
I think people at first blush think that proportional representation is a more democratic idea. I don't happen to think so. I think that there are plenty of countries one can point to where it has not worked. And one of them, by the way, was the Weimar Republic in Germany, pre-Hitler.
A lady there in the red.
That's right.
I would merely want to point to all the countries where it does work, such as, say, West Germany, Sweden, you know, all these terribly poor countries which have been in chaos for years. I mean, that's just rubbish. Come on.
Right, that's PR done for now. Let's hear some more views about this important document that the Labour Party endorsed earlier this week. There is a hand there. Yes, I can see you. Yes, sir.
Thank you. Yes, I agree with Tony Benn. I'm not a Labour Party supporter, but I believe they are heading for disaster. They're trying to change policies in midstream, and I don't think it works. The general public don't stand for it.
Right, is there another view on that? No.
Can I take up a point with
please.
Jack here? See, this realistic attitude you have, you know, we've got these realistic proposals, we're going to do this and we're going to do that. All this we've watched before. We watched it before 1964, we watched it before 1974, had a series of proposals which you were going to carry out, which were going to, in one way or another, attack the people at the top of society, and make it a fairer society in that way. What happened was that there were things which were outside your control, things like a great run on the pound, which you couldn't control. A lot of money left the country, and the policy changed. The policy on incomes policy changed. The policy on unemployment.
What was the alternative to changing the policy?
Well, the alternative, what I'm saying is that this idea that realistically you can put out a series of proposals which challenge the people at the top of society and carry them through by parliamentary methods, this is what I'm saying, is constantly vitiated by the facts. The whole of the 20th century, there have been Labour governments elected trying to do things on promises which they haven't carried out. Their whole policies have been overturned, not because they didn't want to do it, but because there were powers in the society, powers represented by these 2 people over there, which were more powerful, which were able to bend them to their will, even though they didn't want them to be bent in that way. That's the problem.
I want to pick up something that Jack said. Jack, everybody's always very keen on reflecting on Mrs. Thatcher's dismissal of the word society, but let me explain what, because I feel very strongly about the way in which this word society was taken over by socialists. You ask about what does socialism stand for. Socialism, we all know, stands for a socialist society with a nationalised centrally directed state. And what socialism has done, in fact, in this country, is to undermine the communities, the small communities, the families, the children, the individuals, the schools, and we have state-organised society instead. And that is what one is trying to get away from, and to give back responsibility to the smaller groups and away from the bureaucracies.
The briefest of comments from David Warrington, then I shall take the last question.
I think everybody would agree that the policy statement is pretty thin gruel. And of course, it was obvious from what Jack said. And all, in fact, he said was we're going to spend more on education, more on healthcare, more on the environment, and more on public transport. But that, of course, is the whole fallacy. John Smith wouldn't like to hear that, because that means a policy of lower interest rates and higher spending, and that means hyperinflation.
Right, now, there's a lot of interest in the last question, but we've only got 3 minutes for it, so everyone must be very brief when it comes to their turn to talk. Graham Sawyer is a schoolmaster from Oxford. Mr. Sawyer.
Thank you. Last night I had some excellent veal sweetbreads for dinner. Well, today at lunch I had roast beef. Am I going to go mad?
Jack Straw.
Probably not, but you raise a very important question. And in this country, what people ought to realise is that we are feeding cattle and other animals, which are vegetarians, animal waste. And as long as people perhaps don't understand this sufficiently, but butchers' waste from slaughterhouses is boiled up, and the solid product from that is fed back into the food chain. A little while ago, John Gummer said that if the Lord had expected us to be vegetarian, he would have made us with 4 stomachs. Well, he made cows with 4 stomachs, but completely contrary to nature, this government has approved the previous practice of force-feeding all kinds of animals with their own carcasses and their own other animal waste product. And as long as we do that, and as long as we do not have a separate Ministry of Food and independent food standards agency, the public confidence in government and government advice about the safety of food is going to be at a very, very low ebb.
Sheila Lawler.
I envy you your dinner. There is no scientific evidence that you will go mad. It's as simple as that. People have been eating scrapie for 200 years, and there literally isn't any scientific evidence that even if you ate infected bovine, spongiform, encephalopathy beast, you would go mad. But you see, it is an interesting question because we don't know. And what I think we ought to do is we should simply leave it to each one of us to decide whether or not to take the risk. And perhaps if we have legislation, we should have a label. This cow or this beast has come from a herd which has been infected or not. And let you take the decision with the information published. And I really don't see why you shouldn't. But if you want cheap food, and part of the problem with intensive farming over the last 40 years is that food has become cheaper. And if we want cheap food, we must take risks.
We're in the last minute of questions. Very briefly, Paul Foot.
It's the ultimate in privatisation, isn't it? This cow makes you mad. You decide whether you want to do it or not. Nothing to do with society at all.
David Warrington.
Animal protein food for cattle was banned 2 years ago. So Jack is out of date. What we've done throughout is to accept the advice of the Professor Southworth, I think it is, and Dr. Tyrrell, and that's what we're always being urged to do by the Labour Party. The thing is to take the advice of experts, do what they tell you to do. That's what we've done. Last word, scrapie has been endemic in sheep for 250 years. Scrapie is the same as BSE. There is no evidence of anybody having got a disease from eating lamb, so probably the experts are right, but we still want to get to the bottom of it.
Very briefly, Mr. Sawyer, do you feel comforted by what you've heard?
Mr. Sawyer, it's called.
Yes, certainly. Certainly. Actually, I was seeing Mr. Gummer give some beef to his child, which made me realise the whole business is media hype. And anyway, I think surely that the English are perhaps being a bit fussy about their food.
I must stop you there. I'm sure we all have very strong views, but the clock will not allow you to express them. That concludes another Question Time brought to you tonight from the debating chamber of the Oxford Union Society. My thanks to the Union for their hospitality and to everybody else who took part. Next week we shall be back in London, and around the table with me then will be the Right Honourable Linda Chalker MP, the Minister for Overseas Development, Harriet Harman MP, Labour's Health Spokesperson, Professor Norman Stone, Professor of Modern History at Oxford University, and Sir John Harvey-Jones, former Chairman of ICI. That's in next Thursday's Question Time at 10:20 p.m. on BBC One. Thank you for watching, and to you all, a very good night.
Jonathan Ross continues in the Wogan seat this Friday evening on One and talks to magician Wayne Dobson and Pan's People. Then at 7:40 in Top of the Pops, the Eurythmics, Lisa Stansfield and Paul Young. At 8:10, The Bitter Taste of Paradise.
Trespassing, boys. That gives me every legal right to blow you to pieces.
After the news at 9:30, Finn fights her case south of the border.
I know you and Eddie were friends, but you can't build a case on supposition.
I know his death wasn't suicide.
At 10:20, a culture shock in Gung Ho as a Japanese car firm sets up business in small-town America.
You're gonna drown yourself. Please take off your watch. I'm not drowning myself. I'm just freaking out.
Freakish encounters of a different kind at midnight when Peter Cushing returns as Baron Frankenstein. A thrilling close to Friday night here on One.
Now on One, completing Thursday night, another showdown for Cagney and Lacey, experiencing a particularly tough episode of the crime-fighting life on the streets of New York.